Hey guys, so sometimes when you're working with a Google Sheet, you need to work on a complex formula. So in this video, I'm going to actually show you how to, first of all, how to get used to if you're new to Google Sheet, how to learn complex formulas and how to implement it and how to think about implementing it. And I will do this by teaching you a formula called the address formula in Google Sheet, and I'll show you how to use it. So let's jump on here. So one way to break down formulas are when something is complex is like this. So you can see that we are using a fairly complex formula here. Well, just to extract the first name of any given string and just render it with the capitalized first letter. So you can build up the formula like this. So you can do a test, you can do some logic, and then you can just build up the formula line by line like this, and then you can render it um, as an output somewhere else. And if you want to write multiple lines like that in Google Sheet, you just have to hold down your Option key, and then you can write multiple lines um, like this rather than the text rolling over. Okay, so let's learn the address formula, and I'll show you my process of learning a formula really fast. So any formula that you might need to use, first of all, you need to identify what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve. Once you've got that, you need to identify, is there a formula that does it? So if you do identify that, then you need to practice, get an understanding of the formula and how it works, and then go ahead and use it. So one way to understand any formula is basically just go anywhere in your Google Sheet and just, once you understand what formula you need to use, that part you need to get to, so you need to get clear in your objective. But anyhow, let's say that we identified we need to use the address formula. So you'll just type in equal, and you'll type in address, and choose the Google Sheets giving helpful hint here, so just click on that. And automatically it gives you a bunch of suggestions. So this is a good place to have a look at. Now, what I like to do is I normally click here, and once it loads, I will just go to the bottom and I open it in a new tab. So I click here, and that opens up in a new tab. So I had it open before anyway. So, and then I will just go line by line and understand what they're trying to say. So, and this is a small documentation. This is a good idea to get used to documentations or using documentations. So for this, what they're saying is how to add. So let's just go through this documentation. And the reason I'm actually using the documentation rather than giving it to you just plain and simple is so that when you're learning, you can use documentation and learn things on your own. So what you could do is just see what the basic use of address is. So you can just go and write that address 1 and 2. What does that really do? It just returns a value. So I've already gone through this, so I'll just tell you what the address formula does. Essentially, what the address formula does, it gives you the address of a row and a column, sometimes to achieve something. So for example, in here, we're trying to do some complex calculations. We want to get the data from a very specific column from a complex, larger data sheet. And to do that, we need to get, So to do that, we need to get the address of the column where it starts, or the row where it starts. So what the address does, it gives you the column and the row of any specific cell. So let's just start a new sheet here, just as an example. So if I created a new sheet, and if I want to get the address of here, so I would say, this is, you can see B3, you just go address. And instead of writing the column and row name, you have to give them the number. So I think it's the first is the row. So if you just say 3, and then the column, which will be AB, which is 1, 2, it will return the value. So it's saying it's B3. Now, so that's what it's saying. Now it's actually giving us back an absolute value. So sometimes you need to get something like this for calculation within Google Sheet, get some type of absolute value like this. So what you could do is, if you don't want this absolute, you can change it to relative. So again, if you just went through this and read this, it actually explains, this documentation explains what are the usage of it. So it says that the first value is the row, second value is the column, then it's an absolute relative mode. In other words, it's checking whether you want the output to be an absolute mode or a relative mode. And that can be defined by a number, which is explained here. So if you give it, it can be, and the number goes from 1 to 4. So let's try different mode and see what it does. You can read further to understand this, but I'll just explain for the explanation's sake. So if I say, give me, by default, this is the value. So it's basically saying, give me the absolute value of the row and the column, and that's what it does. Absolute B, absolute 3. So it will always keep that like that. If I say 2, I think it will go only row. So you can see that here, it says here, 2 is row absolute in column relative. So you'll see that $ is gone there. From the row, only 3, it's keeping this absolute and this relative. And then 3 does the opposite, where it does this absolute, this relative. And then 4, and they're both basically relative in this instance. So again, you would need it depending on how and where you want to use it. Sometimes you need relative values, sometimes you need absolute values, etc. Now, there's another piece within the address formula, which is true or false, and other parameters. What it does is it tells you, I'll show you actually from the documentation, it tells you use A1 notation. So A1 notation basically tells you, let me just get out of here, so basically tells you that I want it to actually mention that this is a row and this is a column. So if I say false, it will say row 3, column 2. Okay, so by default it is true, which is like this. It doesn't. So that's a different note. You're telling the formula that I wanted the output to be in this notation. So you can just leave it blank, and by default it will give you something like this. And the default value without the third parameter is this type of notation, this type of absolute relative. So it gives you an absolute value. So those are the address formula. Let's go 4. And I think there's another parameter. You can also mention the sheet name. So maybe you are getting this value, but from a different sheet. So for example, I might want to get it from formula. So let's actually do that test. So if I go here, and let's just say hypothetically, I want to see what's in the row 4 and column, what is the number, what is the value, the address of this particular cell. So it would be row 4 and column B. So the way I would want to get it is, I want to get the 4th row and I want to get the 2nd column. I want to see what's in there. So what is the address of that? So let's try that. So address, and I want to get, let's just see, address 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to get the 4th row, and I want to see the 2nd column, and I want to get it in a relative value, and I want to get it from this sheet. So we'll just say in the quote, we'll just say formulas. Let's see what it returns to us. So there seems to be a little bit of a bug. So the bug here is, it's good to actually get bugs, that way you get to learn better. So it's actually, when you see a bug like this, you need to just hover over and see what is the bug. It's saying function address parameter 4 expects a Boolean value, but formula is a text and cannot be corrected to a Boolean. So basically what it's saying is that we have got the 3rd and 4th item here, but the 4th item should be a Boolean, true or false, right? So if it was 1, that would convert to true or false, and it gives us a value. But if it's true, for example, it will work as well. So basically it's saying that, how do you want this? Do you want the notation? Remember the 4th value? 2, 3, 4th value, A1 notation. If you say false, then it'll ignore that A1 type notation. It'll just give it to a slightly different formula. So it'll show us differently. So let's just go false. And now it's giving us this type of notation. This is row 4, column C. If you go true, it just says it's B4. Okay. So again, sometimes you might need to get the address of, and it's also giving us the value of, giving us the name of the sheet here. So again, that might need to be formatted when you adjust this. So we, just by looking at this, for example, this is a merged cell, so we don't know, is it C4, is it D4, and you don't know. And you might want to get it relatively, you might want to get it non-relatively, so things like that. So yeah, so that's how you use the address formula. And again, before you use the address formula, you might need to use the address formula in conjunction with some other formulas. So for example, in our case, we are actually building up a formula here so that we can get a specific column. So we're going to use it in conjunction with the match formula. But this is one way to visualize it. And if you have more questions, obviously feel free to let me know, or someone from our team will respond to you. But that's how you use address formula, just to get the address of any specific cells. So I think the most important part is just these 3 item. So that gives you a specific address. So these three parameters, the row, the column, and whether you want absolute or relative value. Okay, hopefully this helps. Thanks everybody.